Cabin Sports Radio.
Here comes the siren. I want to go higher. Oh, my goodness. Will defend. Oh! LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
Oh, baby, for sure.
Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Lekter and Unbreakable Mike Gibbons back with you after what seemed like a lifetime away from Cabin Sports Radio. A lot's happened since the break, since our last show. Of course, we took last Monday off for Thanksgiving Monday. Hopefully you had a wonderful Thanksgiving long weekend and stuff yourself with food. Obviously a lot tougher to get together with family this year as it has been in previous years, but hopefully you made the best of it. And hopefully you're ready for some sports chat because, quite frankly, a lot has happened. We are back, though, to talk about everything, bring you through it. The NHL free agency, the NBA Finals, finished off, and we're going to tee up a little bit of World Series 2020. So, without wasting any time, Michael, let's get into it.
Well, I think the last time we were together before the Thanksgiving long weekend, the Heat had just rallied and came up with a Game 3 win, to trim their series deficit 2-1 on the backs of Jimmy Butler.
Yes.
Had an absolutely heroic effort, a 40-point triple-double. And
LeBron was in trouble.
That's right.
As I recall.
He told LeBron in the fourth quarter. Apparently, the full context for that trash talking, at some point in the first quarter, LeBron told Jimmy that he was in trouble. So it was just all coming full circle.
Right.
Jimmy had himself a game for the ages, a historical performance, and he was just giving it back to him at the end.
Yeah.
Now, in the context of the overall series, I don't think LeBron was sweating too much. They went on to win 2 of the next 3 games and win in 6 games to claim their 17th NBA championship, tying them with the Boston Celtics for the most all-time, the 2 most storied NBA franchises by a mile. And I know you and I have strayed further and further away from predictions. Maybe we can bring up the tape sometime down the line, because I did say Lakers in 6.
Did you?
I gave them 2 games. Up until that point, the Lakers were able to dispatch of everyone in 5. The Heat are a very good team, and they were super banged up. Even by the time they started, Game 1 was a disaster for them. They lost Adebayo and Dragic, who didn't come back to play at all because of a tear in his foot. Adebayo did come back, but it's clear he wasn't quite himself. He wasn't putting up the same numbers he was able to put up against Boston, probably because he was playing against someone of Anthony Davis's caliber. But yes, in the end, the Lakers proved to be too much. The 1-2 punch of James and Davis put up an all-time performance, and they are your 2020 NBA champs.
So much like the conclusion of the NHL playoffs, the NBA, kind of what we expected going in.
I think after the Clippers and the Bucks bowed out, there were some analysts saying that this is a cakewalk. Cakewalk for LeBron. I know, really bad. But it was, the path to a title after that point, after both the Clippers were eliminated by the Nuggets and the Bucks were taken out by the Heat back in round 2. I think a lot of people thought that the path for LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers was a lot easier than it would have been otherwise. But still, really good teams. You had to take out the Nuggets, who had 2 really impressive 7-game series wins after trailing 3-1.
They looked like they were posed for a Cinderella type story.
Totally.
Yeah.
But overpowered eventually by the star power of the Los Angeles Lakers. So that sort of was the thinking, that it was an easier path to a title, but you still had to take out 2 good teams. And the Heat obviously had a great run beating the Celtics and the Bucks and then the Pacers. So some really good teams in the Eastern Conference. They deserve to be there as much as anyone. And Jimmy Butler proven to the world that he belongs among the greatest in the game right now. He's a superstar, and he put his team on his back, but it wasn't quite enough. And a 4th title now for LeBron James.
So, of course, as everyone could have predicted, and even was the case before, the greatest of all time controversy has come up once again because, of course, this is LeBron's fourth title, fourth Finals MVP, and it's always a fun topic of conversation, but there's always, there's basically, you fall into two camps. There might be the odd person who falls into a third camp, but basically you fall into two camps. You either think that Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time, or you think that perhaps LeBron James is the greatest of all time. Michael, where do you see that argument headed now?
I'm going to answer this very diplomatically, very politically, but I liked what Mark Jackson said. I think it might have been during Game 6 or maybe Game 5. I think it was Game 6, though, of the NBA Finals. He thinks, and this I absolutely agree with, and I think most people probably should as well. I think when all is said and done, LeBron James will have had the greatest career ever. So he's at 4 titles right now, 4 Finals MVP. He was clearly the best player, and he's played with some Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
Dwayne Wade, Kyrie Irving, Chris Bosh, Anthony Davis, Kevin Love. He's played with really, really good players. He's always been by far and away the best.
Yeah.
So rightfully so, has 4 Finals MVPs. There was a little bit of a controversy, I guess you could say, that him and Davis were basically at one point in this series playing for the Finals MVP. They weren't playing the Miami Heat. They were playing each other.
Right.
And LeBron ran away with it.
Yeah.
Even in the Game 5 loss, put up another 40-point, pretty much averaging again a triple-double in the NBA Finals, which is absolutely absurd. After the game, interviewed saying, I think the interviewer teed it up by saying, "You've had the longest prime in professional sports history. Forget basketball. Professional sports, this has been the longest prime we've seen, which is like 15 years, which is just insane."
Yeah.
So I do think, at this current trajectory, he will amass more points than anyone in NBA history, trailing only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Karl Malone at this point. And the writing's on the wall. He's gonna eclipse both of them, and then maybe join the completely unfathomable air of 40,000 career points, 10,000 career rebounds, 10,000 career assists. Obviously, no one's come close to that ever. And then you put on, the 4 regular season MVPs, the 4 final MVPs, the 4 titles, and he could win more, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
And the first person to ever lead 3 different teams to an NBA Finals win. So I think when all is said and done, he will have had the best career ever. Is he the GOAT? I don't know. And, like you said, there are people that firmly fall into the MJ camp, very rightfully so. 6-0 in the finals. He has 6-4. 6 titles, 6 Finals MVPs. 5 regular season MVPs. So you could even
he was mad about that one he lost out to.
Yes.
Was that to Karl Malone? Yeah.
That's right. So, and everything was personal for Michael Jordan, right? So you saw the documentary, The Last Dance.
Yeah.
Now it's a pretty famous meme. It became personal for me.
Yeah.
You could breathe wrong, and it became personal for Michael Jordan, and he was going to rack up 40 on you the next time he saw you. And, some people say there's still a Hall of Fame career difference between the two of them, so that those 2 titles, those 2 Finals MVPs, and that 1 MVP, that's still a Hall of Fame resume in itself.
Yeah.
And that is the gap between LeBron and MJ right now. But, and I've kind of heard this thrown around since too. I kind of more prefer the term GOTE, greatest of their era.
Oh, very nice.
Right?
Very nice.
We will never know.
No.
And, there are arguments to be made for both players. Obviously, I think at this point, it's pretty unanimous that they are 1 and 2. No matter how you look at it, they are 1 and 2. There might be some other people that have had arguably better careers, but if we're talking the greatest to ever put on the shoes and play the game of basketball, it's those 2. They're always held in the same conversation with each other. And the scary thing is that LeBron's not done, and they could even look to recruit more players to play with them now. The latest Chris Paul rumors. Maybe they tried to hang on to Rajon Rondo, who had a really good run, was really good in the series clinching game. Maybe they move Kuzma. There's some other guys that they may part ways with and bring in more talent if they can. There are always marquee free agents linked to LA. So they're their run might not even be over. So we'll see. I think when all is said and done will be the time to reflect, but he's certainly on a path to all-time greatness and potentially the best ever.
And yet just feels like there are some people who will just never give him the credit he deserves. You know, whether or not you want to give so much credit that you say he is the greatest of all time, regardless, there are some people that they just don't want to give props to LeBron James for whatever reason. But I mean, the numbers, the career itself speaks for itself. And like you said, once again, another NBA Finals with another different team. And once again, he was surrounded by, you know, a pretty good supporting cast, but still the standout absolute star. And it's just a testament to the incredible career that he has put together. But so there it is, the 17th title for the LA Lakers. Who knows, possibly an 18th to follow next year. But that is, of course, getting way ahead of ourselves. So rather than doing that, let's turn our attention now to another COVID-affected league that is entering its championship series. The Major League Baseball World Series is set.
That's right. The Tampa Bay Rays will face the Los Angeles Dodgers for the 2020 MLB World Series, another COVID championship, if you will, and another winner from either Tampa Bay or Los Angeles.
Yeah.
We had the Lightning, of course, win the Stanley Cup, and we had the Los Angeles Lakers, as we just said, winning the NBA championship. So a city of champions, if you're either in Tampa Bay or Los Angeles. Should be a pretty fun series. Both conference championships going to a deciding 7 games. The Houston Astros, the cheaters.
The cheaters that everyone forgot about.
They're done. They put up a really good run, though. They beat the Twins in the, that would have been, the best of 3 wild card play-in round, and then they played the Oakland Athletics in the divisional series. Got into a 3-0 hole against the Tampa Bay Rays. They were on cruise control, and then forced a Game 7. So the Tampa Bay Rays,
trash bin came out.
That's right. Yeah. So the Tampa Bay Rays there was definite potential there for them to become, I think, only the second team in MLB history. I want to say the other one, I think, was a conference championship, and it was between the Yankees and the Red Sox. I think the Yankees, I can't remember. One of the two of them came back against the other. But this doesn't happen in baseball. So thankfully, though, for the Rays, they were able to get out of there. Carlos Correa had some words to say. You know, all the detractors, they want to see the Astros lose, of course. Yeah. After that horrendous cheating scandal, one of the worst in professional sports history. Their story done now. And a chance for the Dodgers to get some redemption. So they appeared in the 2017-2018 World Series, a loss to the Astros when they won their first championship back in 2017, and then followed up the next year losing to the Boston Red Sox. So, and they were one of the teams that was really vocal after the whole cheating scandal because, of course, they lost a World Series at the hands of the cheating Astros. So they're definitely looking to get some redemption this time around. So should be a pretty fun series.
Isn't it just amazing how, a worldwide pandemic, and we just forgot about that whole cheating scandal.
Yeah. It was. It got a lot of. It was in the limelight quite a bit, obviously, but it was lost. In the deck a little bit, but no, we were reminded, and Carlos Correa reminded us that we should still respect them. There were a lot of detractors, and for good reason, but their series and their season officially done now.
Well, thank God for that.
Yes, it's done. It's done.
All right, we will be back after a break on Cabin Sports Radio.
The Cabin Sports Radio podcast, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward.
Cabin Sports Radio, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Check out sportnorth.com for some upcoming coaching courses just put on the page just recently. Starting October 23rd, there are courses running right through to December 18th. They are online courses, and for more information on those or to sign up, you can get into contact with Rita Mercredi. That's rmercredi@sportnorth.com. cabinsportsradio.com. And we thank them, as always, for their generous sponsorship of this show, Cabin Sports Radio. All right, turning to the NHL free agency. It's, I don't know about you, Mike, but last week when we were off because of Thanksgiving Monday, I was half tempted to try and do a show just because there was so much that had happened. NHL free agency had started, and the signings came quickly, and it was pretty exciting stuff. A lot of big names up this year. Of course, the big one that all of the rumors were circling around towards the latter half of the NHL playoffs, and shortly after they concluded was, of course, Alex Pietrangelo, who everyone was wondering where he was going to head, because all we had heard was that he had been told by the St. Louis Blues to explore free agency. It was not going to get done in St. Louis, so of course the Toronto media was just all on Twitter and other social media avenues about where he may end up. Of course, a lot of people thought that the Toronto Maple Leafs might make a play because he is from just outside of Toronto. Perhaps a hometown discount.
Yeah,
but no, that was wishful thinking. Alex Pietrangelo was signed by the Vegas Knights for 7 years at $8.8 million, which I feel like is maybe a slight discount on the numbers that we were hearing that he might sign for. I thought that he was looking for somewhere just north of $9 million.
Yeah.
But that might be the allure of a team that in its first couple seasons has already proven time and time again that they are a contender. They have a solid base. And not surprising that Alex Pietrangelo would make the decision to go to a proven contender. Stay in the Western Conference if that's what he was looking for. But nevertheless, there it is. Alex Pietrangelo headed to Las Vegas for 7 years, $8.8 million per season. But I thought we'd take a little look at the Canadian teams, what they have done in free agency, of course, because, well, there's just too many teams to talk about in this league. So we narrow it down to the teams that actually matter to people up here in Canada. Figured we'd start in the West because traditionally we always start in the East. And I think people get mad at that because we spend too much time talking about the Leafs and then try and squeeze in the rest of the teams in about half that time. So let's try and avoid that. We'll start in the West. The Vancouver Canucks. In my opinion, their needs coming into this offseason are not super well defined. I think we saw a team this past regular season and right into the playoffs that right from the start of the season exceeded expectations. They've got a young, exciting core, and there seems like there's no reason why they shouldn't continue to grow with that core. They're trending absolutely in the right direction. So I don't know that there was much that this team needed to do other than just try and keep the pieces that it had in place already. Kind of got off to a bad start in that way heading into free agency. We knew that there was a good chance that Jacob Markstrom, who was largely their starting goaltender from last season, probably would not be sticking around. And lo and behold, they did lose him, did not get him re-signed. But one that I think is really going to hurt is losing Chris Tanev on defense. He's him and Alex Edler are two of their longer time veteran defensemen. And this is a team that is, young throughout, but on defense especially as well. I think it was kind of important that they hold on to those guys. I think that one might hurt, losing Chris Tanev. Yeah,
that one's going to hurt probably more than losing Markstrom, who might have even priced his way out of Vancouver a little bit. They, like you said, they have all the means to stay the course. They had a really promising season. Certainly one of the Canadian teams with a really bright future. They've got an excellent forward core. And if they were going to solidify something, it'd probably be more so on the back end. So, like you said, losing someone like Tanev definitely hurts. But I think they're okay in goal, especially with the signing of Braden Holtby and with the emergence of Thatcher Demko, who really came onto the scene, burst onto the scene during the playoffs. In their series win against the St. Louis Blues, but also in defeat against the Vegas Golden Knights. He really shone. And that sort of, I think, was the notion that someone like Markstrom would have priced himself out of that market, and there was a sense that a team would overpay for his services. Right. And he ended up getting a 6-year $6 million AAV deal elsewhere. We'll get to that in a bit. But bringing in Braden Holtby, I think, helps. He's obviously he's won a cup with the Washington Capitals, and he can provide a good mentor type role to someone still young, pretty inexperienced, unproven on a larger scale in Thapshire Demko, and he can really be someone that can help out. Another consideration, the expansion draft at the end of next season. So they essentially get a nice trial run with someone like Braden Holtby at the helm. If they lose him potentially to the Seattle Kraken when the expansion draft happens at the end of the upcoming season, then they've got someone who's hopefully a little more proven and gets 1 year under Holtby's wing, and that would be Demko. So a nice signing, I thought. I think it makes sense, but hopefully they can deal with losing Tanev on the back end. Yeah, I think this overall I think it's a big win for the Vancouver Canucks. Like you mentioned, Braden Holtby, a Stanley Cup winning goaltender. His last couple regular seasons, 2 years ago was the playoff when he played phenomenal for the Washington Capitals, and they did end up winning that cup. The regular season heading into that playoff, I think there was a thought that if Holtby couldn't get the job done, that might have been the end for him at that point, because he did not have a remarkable regular season, had a great playoff run, but followed it up this past regular season with, again, not a great performance, and I don't think he inspired a lot of confidence moving forward in the Washington Capitals, which for years I have thought that Braden Holtby has all of the tools to be an absolute franchise goaltender. Definitely. So when, a couple seasons in a row, he just didn't quite look like himself. It was surprising to me, but it could be one of those situations where it's a guy who perhaps needs a change of scenery. This could be a very good situation for him because obviously, as you mentioned, Thatcher Demko is a highly valued prospect by the Vancouver Canucks. I'm sure they would love to give him a lot more time in net and see, if he can take another step forward in his development. You bring in a guy like Braden Holtby where you've kind of got a safety net where if Demko can't be that guy and take on that added load, or at least not yet, you've got a proven veteran in Braden Holtby to play off those starts with, and maybe even just do a 50-50 thing, as we've talked about on this show. Yep. That's kind of the way it seems to be going anyway. Plus, I think that's a pretty reasonable contract. It's safe. It's 2 years, $4.3 million per season for a guy who, again, I still think has the tools to be a franchise goaltender, a top goaltender for any team in this league. So I think overall, that's definitely going to hurt losing Chris Tanev, but if anything, I think the Vancouver Canucks only got stronger in goal. So maybe that offsets some of the defensive depth and veteran leadership, of course, you lose with Chris Tanev headed elsewhere, which, again, what that you alluded to, we will get to a little bit later on. But before we get to that, let's move on to the Edmonton Oilers. Needs, I don't know why, but it seems like every year that goes by, you could just... it just seems like the Oilers need a little bit of everything. Yeah. Obviously they've got two of the best scorers, if not two of the best players in the league right now. One, back-to-back MVPs for their two top stars. But it always seems like there are just glaring holes with the Edmonton Oilers. But first and foremost, I think forward depth is something that they needed to address and then solidify the goaltending. Yeah. Defensively, this is probably the best Edmonton Oilers defense core we have seen in quite some time, at least on paper. But I think their wants and their needs are still pretty obvious. And they made a couple splashes right off the bat with their free agent signings. Yep, bringing in Kyle Turris into the fold, who he was bought out by the Nashville Predators. I think it was something like he signed a gargantuan contract. I think he was on the tail end of a 6-year contract. And it was the final 2 years of that contract bought out. So he was available. So Kyle Turris now in the fold. Tyler Ennis, former Toronto Maple Leaf, 1 year, $1 million deal. Anton Forsberg, and another former Toronto Maple Leaf, Tyson Barrie. It was long expected that he was going to price himself out of Toronto. They don't have the means to retain him. And the pairing just didn't work right from the get-go. It wasn't a great matching with the Toronto Maple Leafs and Tyson Barrie. So he goes off to another Canadian team. You're right, though. It's always sort of been, which is surprising when you've got generational talents like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. It's always the depth scoring that was always an issue for them, the third and fourth line scoring. Someone like James Neal, who they brought into the fold, had a really promising start to the season, but then sort of tapered off. And then, we've seen, obviously, during the power play unit, you're going to see Draisaitl and McDavid playing together. There have been periods where they've played them together. There have been periods where they've had them sort of as a 1A, 1B, centering respective lines. But beyond the production of those two, there's a pretty big fall off. So that has always been a need. I think more concerning for me, though, and you've jotted it down as one of your needs here, is solidify goaltending, and they did no such thing.
They have yet to do that.
No. Yeah. So at this rate, they are prepared to, and we don't know when the 2020-2021 season is going to kick off. We've heard as early as the first week of January. Also heard beginning of March thrown around. We don't know. I don't think anyone does at this point. But at this point, it seems like they're posed to roll out the same starting tandem of Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith, which I can't think it
inspires much.
No, and that I thought would have definitely been a need. Hovering in the low 900 for save percentage collectively. Combined didn't really have a great year, and come the play-in rounds, it wasn't enough to get them past the Chicago Blackhawks. So definitely a need, I think, and there's still time to address it. I don't know what the market is at this point. There was a lot of goaltenders switching locations in the past couple weeks, so it might have dried up significantly. But that's still, to me, with the depth scoring is a real concern for the Edmonton Oilers, and hopefully something they can address.
Yeah, I like the Kyle Turris signing. I think he's still got a lot of life left, and plus it's a very low-risk contract, 2 years, $1.65 million per, so he's not even really costing you much on your cap, but has that potential to, now you've got Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, or if you want to just make it go 4 centers down, then you've got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Kyle Turris, and what's his name again? Anathan.
Athanasiou.
That guy that they got at the trade deadline last year from the Detroit Red Wings. He can slot in there as well, but I do think Kyle Turris adds a very important depth piece. He could play a second or third line just if you want to even move the Nuge up and power up that first line. It gives you a lot of options bringing in a guy like Kyle Turris, plus a veteran, good face-off guy. Tyler Ennis, I think, is another good addition. He's been a useful player everywhere he's been. The Leafs brought him in for a year. The Buffalo Sabres, of course, he spent most of his career there with the Ottawa Senators. He, was a spare part. He's kind of one of these players that could play on any club talent-wise, but he's at the point in his career where nobody wants him to be the answer.
Right.
So I think in the Oilers' case, this is a good addition. It adds potentially a little bit of scoring depth. A guy who can maybe, notch you 15 to 20 goals, take a little bit of the pressure off of that top line, especially if they don't end up improving their back end at all in goal. Maybe the thought is, well, if we can't get better in goal, perhaps we get better on forward and try and score all our troubles away. You got 2 guys who could certainly help you do that. And then bringing in Tyson Barrie, who I think will only help that power play. Again, a pretty reasonable contract compared to the start of last season when the Leafs traded for him, knowing that they probably weren't going to be able to afford to re-sign him. And at that time, I think the numbers being thrown around were somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 million.
Yeah.
So less, half of that, the Oilers get him for 1 year. So again, no risk and potentially a really nice addition to that defensive core. Moving just south in Alberta to Calgary, their needs, I believe, were basically solidify their goaltending. You could add a few pieces here and there. I think their defense, they're relatively happy with. Up front, they had issues 2 years in a row in the playoffs where they just couldn't seem to score enough. But they do have a young core, and I think we can all agree that they would have probably fared a little bit better in that first round had Matthew Tkachuk been healthy and ready to play. He's a big part of that team, and he's only going to become a bigger part moving forward. So first and foremost, their needs were solidifying that goaltending. They lost TJ Brody, which I think it might hurt a bit. Obviously, you lose a nice mobile puck-moving defenseman on the back end. They made up for that by signing Chris Tanev away from the Vancouver Canucks. 4 year, $4.5 million per. That's, I think, a pretty reasonable amount for a guy like Chris Tanev. He's just a solid two-way defender in my books. Another signing on defense they made, which I think is a really interesting one, and I feel like could pay off well for them, is signing Alex Petrovich, who has spent, I think, his entire career in Florida to this point. And really, I think there were really high hopes for him like 3, 4, 5 years ago. He was one of these young kind of bubble defensemen who people thought might one day get into that, that like upper class of maybe not quite elite, but like that upper class of defensemen. Didn't seem to work out for him there. So the Calgary Flames bring him in for a 1 year, $700,000 contract. No risk whatsoever, but maybe a guy who can pay off and maybe kind of reprove his worth on that back end of an already strong Calgary Flames defense core. And then, of course, Jacob Markstrom, big signing. That is what they needed. They needed a guy who they thought could be the starting goalie. And like we talked about earlier, there was a thought with the Vancouver Canucks that perhaps they may overpay to retain the services of Jacob Markstrom. I don't know if you want to say that 6 years, $6 million per is overpaying. It's probably close for a guy who still really hasn't proved much other than the fact that he can be a decent starting goaltender. So, interesting. I think there's some good things that the Flames have done this free agent season, and I think, there may be some risks that don't pay off. We'll kind of have to see how that one goes.
Yeah, it's bordering on steep, like when you're getting a starting goaltender who did have a really good year, .918 save percentage, 2.75 goals against average, but last year was a bit of an outlier. It was definitely a career year for him. He's been steady, posting in the low 900s for save percentage for his whole tenure with the Vancouver Canucks, but last year was by far and away his best year with the club. So I think there was a bit of a notion at the start of free agency that there might be a team that would overpay.
It's time to cash in.
Sort of on the heels of what was a very good season for him, but may not be indicative of his true value.
Right.
But it's a good pairing. So they've still obviously got David Riddick in the fold. So if they decide to do a 2-goalie system, or they end up leaning more heavily on Markstrom, who certainly proved himself last year, that's good. They're definitely solidifying what was a need for them in the goalie department. Like you said, for the most part, rolling back the same defensive core, factoring in the loss of Brody, but then bringing in both Petrovic and Tanev. Those I think were their needs. They don't have super flashy forwards, but they're a proven group, at least in the regular season. Anyways, they've got a good top six, some elite level players in Gaudreau, Tkachuk. They can roll out a pretty good squad, and I think they have addressed some of their needs. Maybe some tweaking here and there, but they'll be competitive in the Pacific still, I think.
Heading east into the prairies, we take a look at the Winnipeg Jets, whose needs were pretty obvious. I think depth at center is something that they would be looking for, and of course that defense core that is still trying to recover from the disaster offseason that was the last offseason when they lost Tyler Myers, Dustin Byfuglien, Ben Sherratt, and a couple other, Jacob Trouba.
Yeah.
Pretty heavy losses to any team, but let alone the Winnipeg Jets, who are still a pretty young team, all things considered. So still reeling from that. In typical Winnipeg Jets fashion, have not done a ton in free agent season. They tend to and they have to this point in their existence, built from the draft and built from development within. But they did make one signing, which I think will probably help solidify that depth at center a little bit, picking up Nate Thompson for a 1-year, $750,000 contract. Virtually no impact on your cap space, and he's a guy who brings grit, veteran presence, and a lot of experience. So I think that'll be a positive signing for the Winnipeg Jets. They still have a lot that they need to address, and the big question still seems to be what's going to happen with Patrick Laine.
Yeah.
Are they going to trade him, or is he going to be part of this team moving forward? So that not a whole lot else to talk about with the Winnipeg Jets. So we'll move east quickly to the Toronto Maple Leafs, whose needs, I think, again, pretty obvious. Grit.
Yeah.
Grit up front, depth on the back end. And they made an immediate splash on the first day of free agency, signing Wayne Simmons to a 1-year, $1.5 million contract. I really like this signing. I think, again, it fits within what they have to spend, which is not a ton. They don't have a lot of cap space, and we know that was the biggest thing hampering them heading into this free agent season. But Wayne Simmons is a guy who brings a lot of factors that the Leafs don't have. He's a big guy. He can get in front of the net. He can go into the corners and win battles. And again, it's another hometown kid. And this is something that I think a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs fans have wanted to see more of. Bring back the ones who have a connection to this team from their childhood, who, aren't just here because they're on a contract, who actually want to be here and play in front of their hometown crowd.
Isn't that what Don Cherry always said?
That's what he always said.
Get some more Ontario boys
on
the Toronto Maple Leafs. A good signing. Obviously, someone who's well past his prime. He was a guy who could get 30 goals for you. Back in the day with the Philadelphia Flyers, and that wasn't the purpose of a signing like this. But he's a big body guy. He goes to the dirty areas. He'll create possession. He'll create space for his teammates just with his size and his physical nature of play. So that's a big win. What you're also seeing, I think, and it obviously speaks to the pandemic and the flat cap. A lot of these rental type contracts being doled out, high, low risk, high reward for a lot of them. And some of these guys pan out and they look like absolute steals at the end of a season when you start to reflect. So obviously too early to tell for a lot of these signings right now, but we're seeing a lot of 1-2 year deals at pretty low rates. And the Leafs handed out a couple of them, Bogosian, Jimmy Vesey, Aaron Dell, and of course the big fish announced over the weekend. From a sentimental standpoint, anyways, a 1-year, $700,000 contract awarded to Joe Thornton, Jumbo Joe, of the San Jose Sharks. And you alluded to earlier the Calgary Flames losing TJ Brodie. He is now a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs for 4 years, $5 million each, solidifying that back end, which also was a huge need for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So they get a little bit of grit. They get nice veteran presence in Simmons, Thornton, even Brodie. So bringing these guys in, I think, will help. They don't need scoring. They don't need forward depth. There were some crazy rumblings at the start of free agency that there was a controversy in goal when Frederik Andersen has been as solid as anyone could reasonably expect someone to be with the blue line that's been in front of him for his tenure with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But rolling out a healthy blue line of Jake Muzzin, TJ Brodie, Finally, now Morgan Riley gets someone on the right-hand side. I don't think he shoots right, but he's a right-handed defenseman, so he can play on the right-hand side with Riley. And then you still got Hall. You still got guys coming up like Logren and Sandin and Dermott, who, so I think we're done. I think Kyle Dubas is done for the time being. Now it's just outstanding contracts. Dermott and Mikheyev, I believe, are the two remaining ones.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't really expect a whole lot more noise out of Toronto.
Yeah, and I agree with pretty much everything you said. Like, I don't know that Zach Bogosian and TJ Brody are necessarily the dream signings you would make from Kyle Dubas' standpoint, but they do improve that depth on the back end, bring a little bit more veteran experience to the back end as well. The Jimmy Vesey signing is one that I think is pretty interesting. He was one of these guys that came out of the NCAA college system with a ton of fanfare. When he was available to sign, there were teams that were kind of lining up in a bidding war type thing to get him. He played a couple years with the New York Rangers, has really had a couple underwhelming seasons, but I still think this is a guy who may make an impact yet in his career. So again, a 1 year, low risk, low money signing. It could pay off for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that's an interesting one to me. One big loss, Kyle Clifford headed to the St. Louis Blues. So there's some of that little amount of grit that they actually had up front heading elsewhere. So I know some people sad to see that. But let us move on a little bit further east to the Ottawa Senators, whose needs are pretty obvious. Everything.
Absolutely everything.
They lost Mark Borowiecki, which is one player in particular that I really wish. I don't know if the Toronto Maple Leafs were targeting him,
right?
But I think he should have been high on the radar. Nevertheless, he is headed to Nashville, signing a 2-year contract with the Preds, making them just that much harder to play against. But they did, the Ottawa Senators, however, pick up Matt Murray, a 4-year, $6.25 million contract. Kind of similar maybe to the Jacob Markstrom situation where you may be overpaying for a guy who still is young, still has a ton of potential, has, as opposed to Jacob Markstrom, not had very good seasons the last 2 seasons, which I think is why Pittsburgh really fell out of favor with him, or rather the other way around. But he gets a fresh start with a team that desperately needed youth in goal. Craig Anderson has been holding down the fort there for God knows how long now, and was only going to be able to do so for so much longer. Another interesting signing by the Ottawa Senators that I think may have come in under the radar as well, despite the fact that he signed for $5 million per season, is Evgeny Dadonov from the Florida Panthers. Had a couple of very productive years in a row. He heads to Ottawa for 3 years, $5 million per. That could really help. You know he's going to get leaned on to put up numbers for that team. He's probably going to get an incredible opportunity, like first line, I would assume. Second line minutes. So maybe a really good opportunity for him to make an impact in Ottawa. Other than that, not much going on in Ottawa. So we head east to Montreal, whose needs were also pretty obvious. Scoring depth, first and foremost. This team has trouble putting the puck in the nets. They keep the puck out of their own net pretty well, but definitely these past playoffs really emphasize the point. The Montreal Canadiens needed to improve at forward. They have potentially done that, locking up Tyler Toffoli for 4 years, $4.25 million per. I think this one could pay off for them. We know Tyler Toffoli has the skill to potentially score you 30 goals in a season. That is what the Montreal Canadiens were looking for. Maybe could have used a guy that was a bit more of a guarantee that they're going to score you 30 goals, but Tyler Toffoli, he showed a lot of things in Vancouver when they brought him in at the trade deadline. He looked really good for them, the playoffs. If he can continue that in Montreal, we could see that signing paying off really well for the Montreal Canadiens. And another question, which was what's going on with Brendan Gallagher? They luckily put that question to rest with signing Brendan Gallagher to a 6-year, $6.5 million per. Obviously, a leader on that team and someone that I think it was pretty crucial that they got back.
big time, home time favorite, and they lock him up for much of his prime now. So that's a really good signing with that longevity. Like we said earlier, not a whole lot of these long-term contracts being doled out with COVID-19 in the picture, the flat cap. So he's obviously a franchise guy, someone you want in the fold, a crowd favorite. So it makes sense, and they've got him for his prime now. And then they'll get Carey Price some help, some relief. He can split the crease if needed with Jake Allen now, who was brought in from St. Louis. So that was, at the time, people thought that maybe the Blues were making some room for Pietrangelo, but they bring Krug in to replace Pietrangelo.
Another big one.
Yeah. So, but of course, Jake Allen was shipped out of St. Louis and is now sharing the crease with Carey Price. So that will help big time, because that was the story for the longest time, that he bore way too much of the responsibility in the crease in Montreal. He was he had seasons where he was playing crazy amounts of games. So if needed, he can get a little bit of rest and a very proven, reliable backup goaltender in Jake Allen. So 3 pretty good signings for the Habs.
So there you go, your NHL Canadian franchise roundup for free agency 2020 season so far. The only thing I'm a little bit sad about is that now that the Toronto Maple Leafs have Jason Spezza and Joe Thornton, imagine how great it would have been if they still had Patrick Marleau.
Who goes back to San Jose.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's getting closer and closer to that all-time games played record, which is pretty incredible. But I would have loved to see that grumpy old men line.
Right.
Oh, that would have been so
minutes.
fun.
So he, I don't know if he saw us, and I found this to be really random. The person he sought advice from, Joe Montana. Yeah. He went to Joe Montana before deciding on the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that one.
I didn't get that connection, but I thought it was just, hometown kid returns home, to finish his career. It's a great story.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. That'll do it for this week on Cabin Sports Radio. We will join you once again next week and talk about everything sports in the North and beyond. Have a great week, and we will talk to you again then.